My guest today is Krista Zaft. She's a coach and educator who works with adult children of alcoholics and people living with the long tail of generational trauma. Her work is to help people to recognize the patterns they grew up with so they can stop repeating them. Today, we're going to talk about what that actually looks like, how survival patterns form, and what it takes to live differently, how to build a steady life when you've never known one. Krista, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
So, I guess let's just get right into it. What kind of
Yeah.
home did you grow up in?
Yeah. Well, a little bit of my backstory. So I am not a therapist or anything. I just want to put that out there. This is my lived experience and how it affected me and how I can kind of pass that on and move forward and help other people. So I grew up in a home with alcoholism. My father was suffering from that. And with that brings a lot of uncertainty, a lot of chaos, sometimes some traumatic events. There's a lot of secrecy involved. There's a lot of shame that builds up, a lot of guilt. As a kid, you don't really understand how to navigate that. And you just develop survival skills, coping mechanisms to really get you through the adult stuff that you were not meant to understand either. And so you start doing things out of absolute necessity, becoming a perfectionist, always thinking, well, if I can do this perfectly, maybe dad won't be drunk tonight, or maybe things will go smooth in the house if I just make sure everything's clean and tidy and be the best that I can be. And you start taking on just an incredible amount of responsibility as a young person, as a young child. And I was the firstborn, which adds another layer on top of that because then I'm taking care also of two younger siblings and yeah, there's just a lot of dynamics that go into that. My childhood wasn't all bad for sure. My dad was a great guy, sober, and he had a lot of amazing qualities. My mom was just trying to keep us all together, keeping our heads above water. She could barely keep her own. So that's doesn't make for a lot of time for emotional safety and to really pay attention to what your kids are trying to get from you, what they really need to form their own identities and all this stuff. So it's very complex when you're a kid and you go through all of this stuff that you really don't understand. And yeah, when you come out the other side, you go through your teenage years and you become a young adult, you've developed all of these coping skills and you just take them into your adulthood and they become completely maladaptive because now you don't need to survive. You need to learn to thrive in the world. And all of those skills and stuff that you learned are really keeping you stuck. They're keeping you in repeating patterns that just aren't serving you as an adult. They were survival skills as a kid, 1,000% you needed them. But we can't make the connection and the differentiate between what we needed in childhood and what's going to serve us in adulthood. We just keep moving along in those same programs, along the same path. And pretty soon it starts to really affect our relationships, with ourselves, with others, how we work in the world, like how we show up even in our careers or in our work world, and good and positive and negative. I was a very high functioning perfectionist, people pleaser, but I would be like striving for more and more and more, thinking if I did this perfectly, did this, the best of my ability, if I had this status, if I had this job, everything would be better. And ultimately, it's just a mask for all of the stuff I was carrying around inside that started to manifest in my adult life. So, yeah, it's very complex.
How did those masks play out in later life?
Well, in a lot of ways that didn't serve me, I can tell you that. You know what? I think this is probably, I'm not going to say true for everyone, but it's true for a lot of adult children who go through alcoholism, addiction, dysfunction of some sort. This doesn't have to be an actual substance. There can be mental health problems in your childhood. There can be with your parents, narcissism, there's a lot, abuse of all kinds, but we just start to form our identities around how we're supposed to show up in that space. And then in adulthood, I think, like I said, I can't speak for all adult children, but a lot of us gravitate towards what we know unconsciously. So we are drawn to people, places, and things that tend to have chaos in them, or alcoholism, or addiction, or something of the same nature, because that's our safety zone. That's our comfort zone. As much as You tell yourself, oh, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say that to my kids, or I'm not going to be in that space. One day you wake up and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm exactly in that space. And so that mask that I thought was keeping me safe was actually leading me to the exact same road that I had come from. And I ended up, meeting a man who I felt comfortable with. And it turned out he was suffering from alcoholism as well. He was battling his own stuff. And then one day you wake up and you're like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm living in the same life that I came from, and repeating the same patterns. It starts to show itself to you. And those masks you want to peel them away, but at that point you just don't know how, because honestly, you don't know who you are. I didn't really know who I was for so long. I had adopted all these different identities. I almost felt like a chameleon in some ways. And I heard other therapists and stuff say this on videos and stuff. And it's like you just adapt to whatever surroundings you're in to make just that feeling of, well, I want to be accepted. I don't want to be rejected. I want to be accepted. I want to feel like I'm part of the crowd. And no matter where that is in your life, you just pull out whatever mask you need and there you go, you fit in. And that's comfort, right? Because there's on the other side of that is a lot of fear. And so, yeah, I entered into a marriage that, was great in some aspects and not serving me in many others, right? And then you have kids, and that's where I had to start peeling the masks off, because when I look down and realize I am spewing this stuff, all of my stuff onto my kids, the anger, the frustration, all of it, that's when I had to start really looking at myself and getting some help.
It was can you talk a bit about that, about how that was my gateway as well, seeing that I was repeating some of the patterns of my parents. What with my kids? What is the difference between those people who just blindly pass those traits on and those who are able to catch those patterns and not pass it on? Like how do you become one of those people who don't pass it on?
Wow, that's a good question. And honestly, a really tricky one. I don't know exactly how you differentiate two personalities like that. I just happen to have the type of personality that I had this little voice inside of me for so long that I kept pushing down and pushing down. And it was this little voice that said, there, you can do better, or there's more out there for you. And I couldn't hear it clearly at first, but it was always there. It was like something inside of me intuitively was telling me that this isn't right. Something's wrong inside of you. And I'm not going to say I'm broken, I need to be fixed. There were things like patterns I started to recognize that I'm like, and that little voice just kept on nagging at me. I think maybe there's a willingness, or a level of awareness that you come into. I stayed silent about my stuff and I kept everything pushed down for many, many years. I was in my 30s when I started to recognize things. And even when I started to recognize it, it was in little increments. I went to therapy. She actually verbally explained to me what was going on, that I had this wounded little child inside me. And the minute my kids showed up at a certain age, it was like a trigger. And that's the age at which my inner child was hurting. And there was a wound there that needed to be addressed. I think that could be different for everybody. Maybe it's your teenage self and it takes you that long to all of a sudden see yourself, right? Or to recognize that in another person. Honestly, I wish I knew why some people have a heightened awareness or an intuition as to get help for themselves, or to recognize that maybe this is me, and other people that just are completely blind to it and continue the patterns and go on the rest of their life. And some people into their senior years and never understanding or recognizing their own stuff, right? I honestly, if someone can tell me that, I'd love to know too. I don't understand it. I just know that inside of me, I did have this willingness and a little intuition that told me something was wrong. It just took me a long time to get past the fear in order to address it. And that's what stood in my way. And I think fear is huge for a lot of people. So that could be one of the reasons right there.
Could be. I'll tell you where that question came from. I was having a conversation with my dad, and it wasn't going well. And I said, "You need to treat me with more kindness and respect." And he said, "This is how my father treated me, so this is how I'm going to treat you." And I mean, I think I treated my kids like that a few times, and then I went, "I can never do this again. This just feels so shitty inside." So I don't understand the difference between those people who don't and those people who do. Like, how do you not recognize that you're causing somebody else pain and passing that
Well,
on?
honestly, I think now that you say that too, I think there's a cycle breaker, and not every generation is going to have that, and that's the reason for generational trauma. I mean, I can trace the alcoholism or the dysfunction probably back several generations before my dad. If I really dug deep, I'm pretty sure I could. Back then, they didn't have the language we have now for sure. Even I'm in my 50s, and even my generation, they did not have the language that I grew up with. And that before that as well, right? Like their parents didn't have. We're coming into a world where it is acceptable to talk about this stuff more and more. So even people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and even older than that are starting to understand, "Oh, maybe I can talk about this. Maybe this is okay." But I think back then there was a real emphasis on we don't talk about our stuff. We don't talk about it with each other. We don't talk about it outside of this house for sure. And especially that because the secrecy, once that door is closed, those secrets stay in the house. And that was a very well understood line that you don't cross with families. And so, same thing, if I could talk to my grandfather or even my dad today, they might say the same things, right? They might say, well, this is just how it was in our generation. We didn't talk about this stuff. And now for someone like me or for someone like you, all of a sudden there's a language that's present that we didn't hear before. Maybe you heard it on TV or on social media. Maybe it was said to you in passing or something. And maybe it's just you're the cycle breaker. Maybe you were brought into this generation to actually be that person that's going to stop this in your family. And it's a little woo woo. You can call it whatever. But I truly think that if you look deep into every family, there's going to be one. There's going to be one person that is going to be that person to break the generational cycles. And maybe it wasn't 50 years ago, but it's starting now. So there's a lot of hope for that. And I think that's why I consider myself, that ripple effect is already gone through my family, right? So I can feel it in other people in my family. And I think there's a few cycle breakers in our family now. It just takes one person to stand up.
That certainly resonates, and I could feel that the confident. I could feel that resonating in myself. I've gravitated more towards the kind people in my family, and I've tried to raise my kids as kind since then. There is a cost to being a cycle breaker, though.
Yes, there is.
How is that showing up for you?
You know what? For me, there's a story to it. For me, it started with my son. So I have lived with some sort of addiction my whole life. And then unfortunately, my marriage dissolved. And then a few years after that, I was faced with my son going through his own addiction, and he was in that, just shy of 10 years. And all of the healing work and all the work I had done, it felt like it kind of went down the toilet because when you're a parent of a child who's suffering with substance abuse, it's a completely different layer, I think, and it feels like a very different situation. It's almost like you're faced with your own mortality. Nobody wants to see their child suffer, let alone the thought of them dying from this is probably the most excruciating thing that you can go through as a parent. And I became very codependent with him. I felt like I had regressed 10 years on all my healing journey. And when I look back now, I know that wasn't true. I think all of the work that I had done carried me through a lot of that. And that little regression was the lesson that I needed. But in saying that, I kind of got to a point where I was like, I broke open. Like I got to my absolute limit. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I can't watch my son die. Something needs to happen. The change needs to happen in this family, not just with me. And I really kind of had an awakening moment, and as a family, we came together and did an intervention and got him into recovery. And he was pretty much on death's door at that point, and I couldn't sit around and watch that cycle keep happening and happening before my eyes. And I was part of the problem. And when we did that intervention, honestly, it was just as much for me as it was for him. I needed to wake up. And he went into recovery, and I went into my own recovery. So I started looking at what was going on with me. It was, I was hearing the language he was talking in his recovery, and he dove in. He was, oh my goodness, he did absolutely amazing. He was ready. And then he actually looked at me one day and he's like, Mom, you need help, right? And I end up going into Al Anon. I went to a few ACA meetings, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics. I listened to the language. I started diving into recovery and stuff like that. And I realized that I needed to face me. I was so busy trying to fix everybody else, control the situation, and not out of a controlling sense, but out of a need for safety, a need to save everybody. I thought, I'm not sure who died and made me God, but that's what I felt like I was trying to accomplish, was to save everybody, to make sure everything was okay. Because if everyone else was okay, then maybe I was going to be okay. And it was the furthest thing from the truth. I really just needed to face myself. And I think that's one thing that was really part of the breaking of the cycle, was I needed to see me. I needed to really look at myself and take personal responsibility for how I was showing up. I was playing the victim a lot. And in actual fact, I had to acknowledge that what happened in my past was not my fault, but that it's my responsibility to start healing and to start breaking those chains, right? And and the ripple effect of that was huge for our whole family.
I'm glad to hear he's on the recovery, or on the road to recovery.
He is over 2 years clean and sober. He's doing amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How do you recommend somebody start to find, like, I find what we're talking about, it's almost like boiling the frog. And I hate that term, but it's like the temperature is just slowly rising and you don't even recognize that you're in boiling water. How do you start to look outside of yourself to even recognize that you are the problem?
Yeah, it's tough. That is not the easiest thing to do. I'm not going to lie. It is really a hard thing. And honestly, the hardest part was recognizing it. The hardest part for me was actually seeing that I was part of the problem. And it's not that I thought I was doing everything good. I felt like I was horrible inside. I had the worst self-esteem within me, but my outside portrayal was something else. It was like who I was inside. I was compensating for, how I felt. And taking that personal responsibility at first was like, what do you mean I'm controlling? What do you mean I have to do this? When I entered into a parent group was the first kind of exposure I had to any sort of recovery. And through the recovery place that my son went to, they had a parent group. And of course, you get all these moms and dads sitting in this circle. And the questions that come up right out of the bat are, well, where's my handbook and how to fix my son? And they're like, well, first of all, there is none. And this isn't about your son. This is about you, and everyone's like, I have to fix me. When someone literally points it out to you and you're in that group, I didn't feel called out. I almost felt this kind of sense of relief in a way that I could do something about it. And as hard as it was to face myself, it was really encouraging to hear other parents talk about it and to get suggestions. And even if you don't want to speak up at first, honestly, being in a group of people in the same situation and hearing your story being told back to you by someone else in their life, you realize A, you're not alone, and B, that we can help ourselves and we can create a better life for us as the family members of people who go through addictions, that's actually really hopeful. And so that was kind of the first step. It was slow at first. I went to the parent groups. I listened a lot. I started sharing a little bit. There were topics and stuff I felt connected to. I could resonate with other people. A lot of it I did over Zoom, so it was out of the comfort of my own home. But that group atmosphere was It's very, very healing and it heightens your awareness. So if you're lacking awareness in that area, there's no shame in it. Finding a group that you can just listen, especially, will help increase your awareness to start with. And from there, I sought out Al Anon. I thought, you know what? I'm going to just be brave one day and take the walk down the steps of that church into the basement. And I went to a few meetings. They didn't resonate. And I thought, I was just about to give up. And I just walked down the stairs of this one meeting in the town that I live in, and I found my people. It was like I instantly felt at home. They were very welcoming, and I listened for the first few weeks. I didn't say anything. I was shy and quiet, but I could hear my own story, and it was like, my goodness, I'm really not alone. There are other people who are feeling this way. And that gave me the courage then to do the step work. And step work isn't for everyone. I get it. But there's something about the 12 steps that if you took the word God out, if even without some of the spirituality stuff, there's some steps in there that everyone should do. They are, bar none, some of the most internal developmental steps you can do. And when I got to step 4, which if you know step work, step 4 is taking an inventory of yourself. And so there's a little workbook and you get to write down and recognize all of the characteristics about yourself, your behaviors, all that stuff, positive and negative. That's when the both doors opened for me. That's when I was like, I get it. Now this is where I get to take responsibility for me, and personal responsibility took on a whole new meaning after that. So I think that was kind of the process I went through. It's going to look different for everyone, but I think if you can just muster up enough courage to take that step to maybe go see a therapist and talk about your stuff, talk to a friend, reach out to a recovery coach. There are a lot of recovery coaches now who deal with not just the people who are in the substance abuse, but the families of them. There's a lot of great books out there now that there never used to be that addresses how the family members are doing and how growing up in alcoholism and addiction and dysfunction has affected you. So you can start looking at those pieces of yourself and understanding. And then, yeah, just hearing other people's stories really helps you heighten your own awareness. So I think that's part of the steps, right? So I just encourage everyone to reach out, talk to somebody, find someone they feel comfortable enough with.
I think you talked about like the big blocks there, like find somebody to talk to, do a 12-step program like that. But I find that often you get into the details and that's much different. Like it's hard living day to day. What did healing look like for you on that day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm going to preface it by saying I did not just step into the recovery world and the 12 steps without several years of other different modalities, right? Like when my husband and I separated, I ended up just going to a few personal development courses. So that little voice was getting louder and louder inside of me. Like there's something more out there for you, whether it be career or personal development or whatever. And I started to do a little research. I started to seek out things. I went to my first meditation. I had never meditated before in my life. I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I can never silence my mind like that. How does that work? So I went to my first meditation. It was there that I connected with some Reiki people, and I had a few Reiki sessions, which is just energy work. And I was very, very skeptical. When you come from a background like adult child, the skepticism is off the charts. Like you're skeptical of everything a lot of times. So I have to see it to believe it kind of person. So when I got into a little bit more energy work, I was like, this is kind of hokey, but you know what? It actually was working. I was finding more peace within myself and I was able to regulate my emotional system. I think my nervous system was just firing on all cylinders all the time. And so that was one of the first things I kind of attacked was how do I just feel some calm inside myself and how do I get my levels to level out my nervous system? And so Reiki, I did some personal development. I really dove into just reading and finding things so I could understand myself better. I had, I think, a big willingness and a desire to grow. And so for someone who's really stuck and those feelings are coming up, You don't have to start with the 12 steps, or you don't have to start with, maybe find a practitioner where you can just relax on a table and have some energy work done. You don't have to talk. You don't have to say anything. It can just help bring some peace and calm into your system. There are a lot of people who do somatic work now, and it is very more and more widely known that, like, the body keeps a score. If you've ever read that book or heard of it, that our tissues and our muscles and our systems hold trauma. And sometimes we don't need to talk about it, but maybe some body work would help. There's somatic therapists or experiencing therapists out there that you really don't have to say a lot. You don't have to talk about the traumatic event. If that's difficult for you, there's other ways of healing and getting your stress level down before you actually tackle some of those deeper emotions, right? I think the going to a therapist and really peeling back some of those deeper layers for me came in time. It didn't happen overnight. And in all honesty, I still see a therapist because there's stuff coming up for me too all the time. When I started my podcast, we talk about hard stuff. These are hard feelings, and I felt things coming up. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back into therapy because I feel there's some layers that I could tackle that would help me release a bit more. And so that's exactly what I'm doing right now. It's not a dead end road. The road just keeps going. I think we're just on this journey all the time. You have to be okay with where you are right now.
I think the work lasts the rest of your life, but it doesn't feel like there's anything more important than this work of stopping that of trauma or those.
Yeah.
What's different about how you live now, emotionally, relationally, spiritually?
Wow. It's kind of like night and day for me. And not that things don't come up, because they do. Life is life. It's always going to throw curveballs at you, right? I think some of the biggest things that I've learned, and that is getting help with this stuff, is my emotional regulation. So my nervous system regulation is a lot better when I'm faced with conflict, which was really difficult for me before, was facing coming front, face to face with conflict. I am so much better at handling what comes up. So I'm able to take a moment and think first. I'm able to pause and say, okay, what do I want to say in this moment? What is, instead of blurting something out and then it turns into this big argument, I'm really able to catch myself. And that comes with learning how to regulate your nervous system and regulate your emotions so that you're not operating at this heightened level all the time. So I think just being more calm in my body and my system, I'm able to handle what comes at me with a lot more grace and a lot more compassion. I think one of the the biggest gifts for me is that I'm a lot more compassionate with myself. Like, I have a lot more trust and grace and forgiveness for myself, and that I don't have to be perfect at everything. I don't have to put on a mask. I can be myself. I can show up in situations that when I speak, I feel my authentic self coming through. And that's huge for someone who has hidden themselves for years and years. That's a big step. So there's just lots of ways. My relationships are healthier. I'm able to talk with people. I feel like when someone comes to me and asks me questions or for advice, I'm less likely to give advice and more likely to help them find their own answers. And that is a big gift, especially becoming a coach like I am now. That has probably been one of the biggest gifts, is to actually witness people being able to come up with their own answers. You have the answers inside of you. It's just getting that support and that help to actually find those for yourself, right? So sometimes we can't see our own blocks. And I think those are the gifts of really healing, doing the healing work, and just being open to always learning something new about myself.
I had the download as you were just describing that, guiding people to their own answers. I think that's a sign of emotional maturity, is recognize that people have their own answers versus trying to push your answers onto somebody else.
Yeah.
Such a big difference.
Yeah. And just on that note too, when I think about that in my life now, I go back in time and I think, and not to beat myself up, but also I help coach people in this realm too, is if I could speak to my children in the same way, in the same capacity that I have now when they were younger. So to younger moms out there or people who are struggling that have younger kids, the ability to teach your kids by having them find their own solutions and their own answers is such a gift to children because we're not doing it all for them. We're not giving them the answers. We're not telling them what to do. They have Kids are so incredibly smart, and allowing them to have the space to figure things out themselves and ask them the right questions to really get them thinking and come up with their own solutions. What an incredible gift that is for the rest of their life. So I think that's so important with parents who are struggling right now and they're frustrated, their nervous systems are unregulated. They're exhausted and overwhelmed and feel really stuck in their same patterns of parenting even. Just learning that skill is you're going to give your kids the most unbelievable gift. They'll be 10 steps ahead of the curve, if that makes sense.
I completely agree. The other skill that I wanted to pick up from what you just said was that idea of a pause. And I find that's such a superpower and it's such a simple thing, but it's difficult to achieve that half a second pause before you respond to something rather than just going at it. Like I think that's a world of difference to be able to catch yourself and then respond.
Yeah. That is not a skill that we just innately have, especially if you come from this background. So it is definitely something that's learned and we can relearn that. So it's not something that's going to happen in the heat of the moment. This is something that you actually have to practice on a daily basis. So if you are interested in learning how to pause and how to take that breath for yourself, there are strategies and little breathing techniques you can do, but this is committing every day to saying, okay, I'm going to practice this for 5 minutes today so that it's like building up a resilience and a skill. So when you actually need to recall it, it's going to be at the top of your head. What's at the top coming out right now is the reaction, is the no pause, is that is a learned response. We've learned it. It's been in our lives for so long. It's so hard to change. So it's a great skill to have, but it can be learned. It just takes practice like anything, right? We didn't come into this world knowing how to walk. It took time. But same thing, every time you build a skill, if you're entering a new job, there's a training period, and if you don't do those things every day, how are you going to remember how to do them? That is absolutely the same way with our nervous system. And if it's that pause and you're a reactive person or you're getting into arguments with people and you don't know how to calm yourself before, that little skill can be learned, but it has to be practiced every single day.
What's still hard for you now?
Lots of things. I think lots of things, I just did a podcast episode with a friend of mine and we do this little thing every month and we've done it for so long. We've been friends for like 36 years. And, she asked me a question and I just couldn't, emotions took over me, so there's still a lot of things in my past that make me emotional. I think on a different way though, so that's still tough handling those emotional things that come up sometimes. I have better skills now to work through it for sure, but I think there's still stuff that is emotionally difficult but I don't think that ever goes away. Honestly, I kind of, as hard as it is in the moment, I find it's always a gift to be able to deal with that in a different way now that I do, right? But it's still difficult, it's still difficult watching your kids struggle. It is still a struggle for me to pull back and not want to control the situation. It's very, very strong programming. Perfectionism is extremely strong programming, especially if you've had that from when you were young, when you were very small. So I think those are daily practices that I have to do. Sometimes I have to walk away from my desk and just take a breath. Sometimes I have to go practice some of the skills that I've learned, and that takes awareness. That practicing that awareness every day takes skill, but it's not always easy. It's not always easy. So I always just encourage people, you just got to keep moving forward, and everyone has bad days. And I try not to beat myself up too much when I do have a bad day. and go down that rabbit hole even further and further. I have some skills that I've developed so I can stop myself in the process and say, okay, we're diving a little deep here. Maybe I need to take a break. I need to take a breather. I need to go do something else. Maybe call a friend, talk to someone. So I've just learned skills to deal with the hard things. It doesn't mean they don't come up. They still do. So yeah, it's a work in progress for sure.
What would you say to somebody who grew up like you and they feel stuck in the moment?
I think the biggest thing for me is the willingness to ask for help. I was so terrified for so many years to just even say the words like, I'm not okay, or I need some help. I can't do this on my own because I was so used to doing this on my own. I was carrying the load for so long, or what I thought I had to carry. So I had built up this fear about asking for help. Like, it means I'm weak. It means I can't handle it. Or if I face it, what happens? Do the floodgates open and they never close? Like, am I going to die because I'm going to express this emotionally? I really thought those things were true for me because I had told this story on repeat, like a broken record in my head for so many years. And so asking for help was one of the hardest things I had to come to understand. So I think if someone's really stuck, start by writing it out on paper because you're the only person who has to see that. But it's I call it a brain dump and it helps me a lot. And if that's the only thing you have is a pen to paper, there is something very healing in the mechanical aspect of moving your thoughts from your head to a piece of paper. And it actually has scientific research back behind it. I don't know it offhand, but there is something that really correlates between getting that out of your head. So if you're stuck and you've got a bunch of racing thoughts, just brain dump them. You don't have to journal like a writer, point form, one word, it doesn't even have to make sense. Just get it down on paper, and that can be a first step. And the second step maybe is to take a deep breath or maybe learn some breathing techniques for yourself. There's lots of stuff that's free on the internet. There's lots of stuff on YouTube. You can learn how to do a straw breath. You can learn to do box breathing. All that kind of stuff helps regulate your nervous system right in the moment because your breath is your number one ally. It's what you have. It's readily available, and most people don't use it. They only use it in the shallow sense that we mechanically have to breathe every day. And then take the next step and reach out for help, even if it's just a friend, and say, "Hey, I'm not okay today." Or how do I ask someone else for help? How do I get professional help? How do what books are there to read? And step by step, slowly, you start to build that willingness and that courage to step out. Courage is not like confidence and courage are not built in thinking about it. They're built in the doing. So if you want to get confidence, you have to do something that requires you to be confident and brave. And sometimes asking for help is that very step.
And I find along with that confidence and bravery, you're going to screw up
Heavily.
and 100%. And I think develop the skill of being okay with screwing up and then getting back up and trying again.
Yeah. I could not agree more. Honestly, I think it's one of the gifts that you get in doing that, but it's one of the hardest things to understand that everybody fails. I mean, multiple times. And I'm not just talking about, there's lots of videos out there and Michael Jordan did this at the 128 times or, this person and that person. It's great to listen to that and hear it, but you actually have to do it to experience what it's like to overcome a little piece of that fear. And you're going to fail. Like that is just a given, but absolutely learning how to sit in that failure and recognize it as a lesson instead of I'm a bad person. It's not who you are. It's just what you're experiencing. And the level at which you go down the rabbit hole is going to be the story that you tell yourself in your head. So if you can get better at telling yourself different stories, that's a key. But yeah, there's failure all the time. If we didn't have failure, how do you learn? Like, how do you move forward if you don't fail at something? It's like, it's kind of like nature, right? We all have to fail. We fall down when we're learning to walk. We make mistakes all through childhood and we don't beat ourselves to death in childhood when we make mistakes. We just get up and keep going, and you're learning to ride your bike. You fall off your bike and you cry a minute and you get back on. And then pretty soon you're riding a bike and you forget that you failed 5 times and you fell off. But guess what? Now you're riding a bike. So, and that's what that's what sticks in your mind, that success after. But you needed to fail to get there. So you just got to do it.
You just have to succeed once. You can fail 50 times, but succeed once and you've succeeded.
Exactly, exactly. And celebrate the little steps along the way, because every time you fail, you're going to learn something and you'll be like, I got in the habit of doing a gratitude journal and just really being grateful for what I have. It opens up bigger and bigger possibilities. I could write two things I was grateful for at first, and then pretty soon I'm writing an entire page of things that I'm grateful for. Because we're our own block sometimes. We can't see it until we start doing it, right? So yeah. And there's lots of failures. Like you said, you have to learn to sit in it. It's uncomfortable, but it's not going to kill you.
What does a good life mean to you now?
A good life means to me, you know what? Just showing up for myself, being the person that I've dreamt of being, and just showing up for myself first of all. Way more kind to myself. I'm more compassionate with myself, and that allows me to show up better in my life for other people. So, I'm speaking my voice first for the first time in my life that I didn't feel like I had a voice. I'm actually doing what I dreamt of, and that's having a podcast and speaking about what's important to me and bringing awareness to all this stuff so that one more person can have a voice, or it touches one more person to take that step and do the work and become aware and start to tackle their inner child stuff or their wounds and grow from that. That's huge. And that gives me purpose every day. I think just, making time for what's important in your life. I love being around my family, and I think as isolated as I have been in my life, being in community with other people, absolutely, it's one of my most favorite things is being surrounded by other people and women specifically who can lift each other up. Uh, I, I've made so many friends in the last year. I can't even tell you, my community is like tripled in size. And we talk about things that are from the heart, and it just absolutely lights me up every day. I spend time in nature more often. I think I really appreciate the little things in life. And like exactly what you just said is I'm learning to sit in the space that I can fail and I can be okay. And I can talk about my stuff and my wounds and my emotions, and the world isn't going to fall around apart, around me, which is what I thought would happen before. So life looks, yeah, I have more joy and more expansive space within my life that I can just be me. That's the biggest thing.
My last question for you. You've been through this harrowing, difficult journey. You've seen a lot of pain, a lot of highs, lows. What's the one thing that you're most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for my kids for sure. They're probably the top of my list. And I'm grateful for myself too, but I say my kids because they came into my life so I could see me. They've given me so many gifts, and just to be able to thrive more in my life allows them to thrive more in theirs. Having the willingness and the patience with myself to grow and to learn and to really tackle the hard stuff, I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful for the incredible people that have come into my world because of the healing journey. Um, I'm just so grateful for friends and family and my children.
I don't know if you know, I think it's the top 5 regrets of dying people.
Mhm.
I think most of them are all about relationships. It's not, I wish I spent more time at work. It was, I wish I developed my relationships better.
Yeah,
So I think you nailed it there.
yeah, yeah. If my work can the work that I do, if I feel purposeful in giving back, then you know what? That's just part of. It's not even work anymore. It just becomes part of your purpose, right? But you can go to a day job and still feel that too, It's all in how you look at it. It's your perspective. So yeah, truly grateful for opportunities.
That was Krista Zaft. If something she said hit close to home, sit with it. Don't rush to fix it. Just notice the pattern. You can learn more about her work at kristazaft.com. I'll have a link. She offers courses, resources, and coaching for people doing the slow work of untangling their past. If you're raising kids while carrying those old patterns, her stuff is worth your time. And as always, thanks for listening, and thanks, Krista, for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.